I called my wife and I said, I have to go to the hospital right now. Something is very, very wrong. And I went outside and just laid down in the yard, in the front yard.
Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 176 of the Strokecast. A stroke survivor rediscovers all the love in his life. This week's episode is brought to you by Modus Nova. To find out if Modus Nova can help you recover the use of a stroke-affected limb, visit strokecast.com/Modus Nova. This week, we hear from stroke survivor Hub Miller. He shares his story in just a few minutes. We're not alone in this episode, though. Dr. Wayne Feng, an expert in tone and spasticity after stroke, joins us as well. You'll hear him share some insights as we learn Hub's story. You may recall Dr. Feng was also the guest on our previous episode, where we did a deep dive into tone and spasticity. One of the things that Hub is going to talk about in this episode is the way the FAST acronym played into his story. FAST is, of course, how you spot most strokes. It stands for face, arms, speech, and time to call an ambulance. I generally cite the expanded version, BEFAST, and I'll have some more details in the show notes about that. We also talk about a surgical procedure called a craniectomy. That's where surgeons actually take out part of the patient's skull in order to access the brain or to relieve pressure in the head, as the brain may be swelling after stroke and there's no room for it to swell into. So they'll remove part of the skull so the brain doesn't crush itself against the skull. They typically will save that piece of skull and put it in a freezer and then put it back in the patient some months later. And with that background in mind, let's meet Hub Miller. So, Hub, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm glad we could make this work. What was your life like in sort of the week leading up to your stroke?
You know, it was pretty normal, pandemic normal. I used to work for a large company in Indianapolis, and we were working from home on the pandemic protocol. So I was running my business from my basement, on Zoom and conference calls, and just a regular week.
What sort of work were you doing?
I work for a large agricultural company called Corteva Agriscience, and I was leading a herbicide business. So we discover and manufacture and supply various pesticides. I led a herbicide business to control weeds in pasture land.
So you're working on doing these things to help make sure that farmers are still able to produce as much food as needed and feed the other animals, and also to help make sure that our pasture land for feeding our large critters is got what they need.
Exactly.
So what happened that day you had the stroke?
Okay, so the day I had the stroke, I had been on the computer in the basement doing some online training class, and I had a remarkable headache, and I was scrolling through my cell phone, looking at emails on the phone while I made the coffee, and started to notice that my left side of my face and vision was really, something was wrong. I knew something was wrong with me. And the headache was just so amazing. I called my wife and I said, I have to go to the hospital right now. Something is very, very wrong. And I went outside and just laid down in the yard, in the front yard. And she arrived home from a nearby grocery store and called 911. And the ambulance arrived and they knew I was having a stroke. And I knew that time was important, because my boss's wife had a stroke about almost 3 years ago now. And every team meeting, he would go over the FAST acronym. And I remember I went to St. Vincent's Hospital on 86th Street in Indianapolis, and I had a CT scan. And not long after that, I was having the emergency surgery, craniectomy, and to remove the blood from my brain.
So, what was your blood pressure at that time?
I think I remember it was 250 over 150, something very, very high. The blood pressure is the cause of my stroke.
Well, blood pressure is one of those really interesting things in the way it causes damage. At the time of my stroke, my blood pressure was controlled. So about 6 months, I had normal blood pressure. But prior to that, I had spent about 2 years or so with high blood pressure, which I only found out when I started having nosebleeds every other day. Took my blood pressure at home, and it was like 210 over 160. And when you tell your doctor's office your blood pressure is 210 over 160, they make it a priority to get you into the office to address that. So you went to the hospital. They did the craniectomy to get out the spilled blood in your brain. How long were you in the hospital then?
I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks in the surgery hospital. Then I moved to a rehabilitation hospital for another 6 weeks afterwards.
So a month and a half in this experience. And do you have a favorite memory from your time in the rehab hospital?
I didn't go there by choice, but I reflect on that time as such a meaningful time in my life to be around therapists that were so highly trained and so good at their job that I look back at that as just a rich experience, to start the process of learning how to live and function again. I learned how to walk again.
It's amazing to have to go in and to work with these therapists who are then teaching us all these skills that we've learned in the past, but last time we learned them, it was probably from our mothers or fathers, and we were 6 to 12 months old at the time. And now we're having to go through this experience as adults and reacquire that.
It's so hard, to be around those people that you just know that they were meant to do this. They're so good at it. Mm-hmm. And the level of care and discipline that they had to work with me and all of the brain injury people that were there is just amazing.
That's great. And I hope you had a great experience. And they really help you to regain a lot of function. That's remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to do it again.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Keep your blood pressure down. That's what I tell most of my stroke patients. Keep it low. Yeah.
Yeah, mine won't be high again.
Yeah.
Yep. 120 over 80 is the target for most folks, and blood pressure monitors are, you can get them for under $20 on Amazon. It's definitely worth getting. And the other thing to note is that if you do live with hemiparesis or hemiplegia, is that the blood pressure on your affected side will probably read anywhere from 10 to 20 points lower than the blood pressure on your unaffected side. So as you're monitoring your blood pressure, for example, I'm left side affected, so I actually so everybody has to take my blood pressure on my right side, which is a little unusual, but that's where you're going to get the most accurate reading of my blood pressure. So those things do change, and sometimes you do have to point that out to some medical assistants or other people who might be helping to take your blood pressure. I went in for my colonoscopy because I was 50, and that you get that lovely commemorative video made once you turn 50, and the anesthesiologists or the nurses working with the anesthesiologist hadn't encountered that difference in blood pressure before, and we're fascinated to try that out on my different arms and see how that worked out. So again, it's not just about blood pressure. It's about trying to get an accurate as possible blood pressure. The other thing you mentioned with those incredibly dedicated professionals, those PTs and OTs and SLPs and rec therapists and all those other people working in the rehab space, if you're looking for something to do for the holidays, you want to express some gratitude, go back. Well, with COVID protocols, you might not be able to visit the therapist, but send them a message over email, send them a handwritten message, and just tell them how you're doing, or send them a photo, or send them a video of the progress you've made. Because those therapists, they see us at our very worst. And when they see it, when the last time they see us is usually when the insurance company has said, okay, you can go home and probably not die. But after a year, after 2 years, so many of them are just thrilled to see the progress that we have made, and you can really light up their day.
I agree. Yeah. And there's also, PT, OT, speech, they really work hard. And I think sending them your progress is really making them day. Same to the doctor. We all feel, the best day we have is to hearing the patient doing better, have a great outcome. Sometimes we can't save everybody, but we always cheered by the one we can save and the one doing great. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Hub, when you were in your rehab facility, how much conversation did your therapist have with you about tone and spasticity?
A lot.
And what did they tell you to do?
My left side was very affected, and my left leg was actually really, really affected, where I could really not even make the repetitions I need to return to walk. And so I had to have Botox injected into my hamstring and calf on the left side just to loosen it up to be able to take a step. And so once that treatment was made, that was really my first foray into the spasticity world, was releasing the leg to be able to even move it.
I had some Botox and Dysport in my leg when I started with those therapies as well, to sort of even out my gait a little bit further down the road. I also had one toe which had very strong tone and spasticity, and so that one toe was always curling under. And when you've got a toe curling under your foot, suddenly your entire body weight is on top of that toe as well, which meant I had to get an injection in the bottom of my foot, which is really not a pleasant experience, and I almost kicked my doctor in the face several times. Exactly.
Some of those big muscles, you really need a big needle to get there. It's not an easy procedure. Yeah.
And it doesn't help if you're ticklish. So, Hub, you had it then mainly in the leg. Did you have issues with the foot as well?
The foot, not as much. My leg and my arm and hand on the affected side, I have issues even still today.
And how long ago was your stroke?
18, 19 months ago.
So you had the Botox in the leg, which helped you start to be able to take some of those steps in rehab, to be able to then continue your therapy beyond that. When you left inpatient rehab, what were the deficits you left rehab with?
Well, I couldn't move my left arm, and I could walk, but with a large base quad cane. So
6 weeks after your stroke, I presumably, since you went to rehab, you probably already had your skull put back in.
Well, in fact, I didn't. I had to wear a helmet.
Okay.
My right side of my cranium was still gone. It was in the freezer at the hospital still.
When did they put that back in?
It was put back in on October the 22nd.
Wow.
Last year. So I've just had my full head for 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when they did that procedure, the cranioplasty to put the skull back in, what changes did you notice once you had an intact skull again?
I would say my balance seemed to be better. And that was something that the neurosurgeon said is common, and you might really like that.
Did you feel your thinking a little bit more clear?
I felt like my thinking was still about the same.
Okay.
But for
your
sure,
your balance is better. I see.
And I think I just felt better. I could sleep better. I think that's the first thing I noticed was I could sleep a lot better with a full intact cranium.
Yeah, otherwise you have to sleep on one side and always worry about it. You flip over the other side and now you have full, there's a lot of psychological component. So
it's fascinating about how that whole system of the way we think and balance and all of that comes together. We think of the bones as just being this separate thing, but really it's part of this entire system. I know a number of years back we interviewed another survivor, Whitney Moran, and one of the things she found was that after her stroke, she lost all ability to do math until her cranioplasty. And once they put her skull back in, suddenly she could do math again. And it's fascinating how these different experiences come into play. And balance is such an incredibly complicated thing to be functioning at such a low of a fundamentally evolutionarily old part of the brain that then has to coordinate hundreds of muscles just to keep us sitting upright. And it's just fascinating how that comes into play. So here we are, Hub, 18 months later. And what is your life like today?
It's not something I would have chosen, but I feel I'm very positive and very encouraged about my future. In fact, I'm very grateful for where I am.
And have you been able to return to work?
I'm not back to work yet. I will be very soon. I have been able to return to driving, which was a huge step in independence and freedom. So I can drive myself to therapy and to doctor's appointments and go to the grocery store by myself. That's just so nice.
And have you had to do any vehicle modifications?
I did do some, but they're fairly minor.
And that brings us to our hack of the week. But first, let's talk about sponsor Modus Nova. Modus Nova helps stroke survivors regain the use of a stroke-affected hand or foot through the power of repetition, which is, of course, the key to pretty much all stroke recovery. The AI-controlled, air-powered robotic exoskeleton helps the survivor move their limb much like the way a therapist may help during a therapy session. It does this as the survivor plays video games, making doing your therapy that much more compelling. As the sensors get to know the survivor better, the device can assist or resist movements more to drive a quality workout. Ultimately, it does take thousands of repetitions to drive the neuroplastic change of recovery, and Modus Nova can help you get there. To find out if Modus Nova can help you recover the use of a stroke-affected limb, visit strokecast.com/Modus Nova. Use promo code STROKECAST for 10% off your first month. And now back to our hack of the week.
Two things that I do regularly now. I participate in yoga class, and I join several kind of survivor communities, whether it be on Facebook or other online forums, which I have found tremendously helpful to be with a group of people that understand what you're going through, and they've got some helpful advice a lot of times. It's always kind of a judgment-free zone, when you're with a lot of people with brain injury. You can learn a lot. And so those two things for me have been awesome, especially yoga. Because in yoga, we spend a lot of time talking about meditations, doing some meditations, practicing gratitude, which is so important. Because no matter how frustrated you might be, if you will stop for just 1 minute and think about all the things that you can be grateful for and thankful for, it's impossible to stay in a bad mood or feel sorry for yourself.
But you have the best attitude. I really commend you. You really have a good attitude. That's really important. Keep it positive is very important. Sometimes life after stroke sucks, and it's okay to say that.
Yeah, and that's the truth.
Yeah, it's completely fine to say that, getting really emotional, but afterwards we gotta move on. We gotta keep it positive. I really very impressed by your positivity.
At 18 months in now, Hub, looking back on this, was your stroke a blessing or a curse?
You know, you can't characterize it as one or the other. I mean, having a stroke sucks, which I think all three of us know. It sucks. It's terrible.
Yep.
I wish it didn't happen to people because it's awful. And it comes with some profound sadness that people will never understand unless they go through it. But along my journey of survival and recovery, I have experienced such an extraordinary amount of love from friends and family, even some strangers, which is a blessing that I thank God for every day. Because it really, I mean, you really know where you are in other people's hearts when they show up to the hospital and you're about to die, and they leave what they're doing to travel across the country to come see you. You know, I woke up from surgery and some of my best friends were in the room, and that meant a lot to me. And that amount of love that my family and I received from other people was just extraordinary and was a blessing for sure.
So if folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
You know, maybe LinkedIn. People can find me because I will update that profile soon. I do anticipate returning to work in a industry that I love and understand next week or week after next.
So Hub and Dr. Fang, thank you so much for joining us on the show this week. This has been fantastic. Hub's story, it's really one of connection and communication. From knowing that something is terribly wrong and communicating that to his wife, to internalizing the fast messaging from his boss, to being a part of a larger community of friends and family who came out of the woodwork to support him when he needed it most. I mean, he does the work with the support of his community and the quality healthcare of his rehab team, and that is serving him quite well. Another important lesson from this week's episode is, of course, the importance of knowing and controlling your blood pressure. High blood pressure, when we experience it, it doesn't hurt. So unless we're checking, we'll probably never even know we have high blood pressure, even while it's destroying the inside of our blood vessels. The target blood pressure for most folks is going to be 120/80. And if you don't know your blood pressure, go ahead and get a home blood pressure meter so you can check it regularly. These meters are not that expensive. You can easily choose from a bunch under $30. I'll go ahead and include some links in the show notes so you can take a look. Keeping blood pressure in the healthy range, of course, doesn't guarantee that you won't have a stroke, but it dramatically improves your chances of keeping your remaining days stroke-free. I'd also, of course, encourage you to take a tip from Hub's boss and share the BEFAST stroke messaging with the people that you work with. This is going to help you spot most strokes. BEFAST for balance, eyes, face, arm, speech, time to call an ambulance. A sudden change in or loss of balance, change or loss of eyesight, change or loss of facial symmetry, the ability to hold both arms up, or the ability to speak or understand language can all indicate a stroke. And of course, a stroke is a medical emergency, and observing one of those symptoms means that it is time to call an ambulance, because time lost is brain lost. So be fast. You can find a graphic of that in the show notes, so you can share it on social media or print it off to display in your home, office, place of worship, or whatever. Just remember to be fast. Balance, eyes, face, arm, speech. Time to call an ambulance. If you'd like to make sure the Strokecast continues to serve your needs, please go ahead and do me a favor and complete the Strokecast listener survey over at strokecast.com/survey. It takes just a few minutes, and it would really help me out to produce the best show that I can. And if you complete the survey before March 31st, 2023, you may even win a $25 Amazon gift card. But please, go ahead and complete that survey and share your thoughts on the show. So, of course, be sure to check out the show notes to find links to Hub's LinkedIn profile and the BEFAST information. All of that is going to be available in the app you're listening to right now, or just go over to strokecast.com/hub. Share this episode with someone you know by giving them the link, strokecast.com/hub. Complete the listener survey at strokecast.com/survey. And, of course, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you soon.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.